What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. We've got another team review to do today, but before we get into that, a few notes on some upcoming things and then some comments that I have seen in this video or videos like this. So, first up is Dynasty content. A lot of you, when I asked about what kind of things you want to see before that May, June timeframe when we really get into the next season for fantasy, you guys said Dynasty, so I'm going to start that probably next week. I didn't want to start it too soon because actual football has been happening. We're really close to the end of last season. Wanted to more go over the last season, look forward to the next season before talking about Dynasty. But we're going to start that next week, probably something like, I don't know, maybe some younger players to target that maybe haven't broken out yet that could break out at different positions. Kind of videos like that, but more geared towards Dynasty. But honestly, if I like a guy in Dynasty, I just like him as a talent, so you should be looking at that in redraft as well. Second note is that rankings are up on the website. If you just felt like looking at what the rankings are for 2021, you can do that right now. And I want you to, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. It's under draft content, and then there's a rankings tab. You should very easily be able to find it. But something like draft content, rankings, and then I only have half PPR up right now because I'm just testing out what it's going to look like, but obviously they'll be standard, they'll be full PPR. And I'm testing out what it's going to look like, so I want you to see if you like it, if you like this new setup. It doesn't have sleepers or busts right now, but it's going to have both of those. And then, is there anything else? So is there any other column that you want to see on the rankings? Let me know. So right now, I think it looks much better than it has been. We are not using the Fantasy Pros rankings as of right now because, I don't know, I just wanted a little bit more customization as far as that's concerned. But I've added in a few things, so just let me know if you like what you see. And then if there's anything else that you want, you got to let me know because, if I haven't thought of it yet, but you really want it, maybe other people want it as well. So check that out, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. On to some comments, though. So first one, I see a lot. People like to say there are way too many good wide receivers, so you can always just wait. And people say that just as a blanket statement. In general, I think the thinking behind that is correct. The base theory that there are so many really good wide receivers that there's no need to go out there and get some of them first two rounds, because this comment in particular was definitely suggesting that there's just no way you should be taking a wide receiver in the first two rounds because there are so many in the middle rounds. Again, I think in general that is a correct statement. But just be careful using statements like that and using the word always, because you can get into the mindset of it's just you cannot do it. And then when you see, 10 wide receivers, 2 quarterbacks, a few tight ends go off the board, and you're still in that mindset of, well, I can't take a receiver, so let's take the 11th best running back. Well, that's dangerous because now you're foregoing a guy in the top end of wide receivers. Here's the main point of this. The top end of wide receiver, while maybe not giving you nearly as much value over replacement level as the top tight ends, sometimes the top quarterbacks, definitely the top running backs, if you get into a situation where you're still taking a top 3 wide receiver instead of the running back 10, 11, 12, well, those top end wide receivers still have incredible ceilings. Think about Tyreek Hill and Devonta Adams. The ceiling weekly and season long that those guys have is still incredible. Imagine the season-long numbers that Adams would have put up had he not been injured for, 2 or 3 weeks that he missed. But he missed a short amount of time, and he still absolutely dominated. You were still getting 25 points every single week from Adams, so that is still a tier above some of these other wide receivers. So, again, in general, you can use it as whenever it's remotely close, you still want to lean tight end, lean running back early. But make sure you're not just blindly applying this and saying you cannot take a wide receiver early, because that's simply not true. If the value is there and the other running backs and tight ends are just not doing it for you, you can still take a wide receiver. So just want to say that. Another thing that kind of goes off of that, I saw a comment that says they're just not drafting wide receiver early because they took Michael Thomas last season and he busted. And we're going to go over a draft today that took Michael Thomas in the first round. Do not think like this. You can't just think back and say, well, took Michael Thomas, that didn't work out. This year I'm taking a running back. Because you have no idea what draft position you're going to be. You have no idea how the first round is going to shape out. I mean, we have a general sense right now, but there could be injuries, there could be trades, and things could just happen to where the first round acts a little bit different than you think right now in January, right? So you cannot, and it's just a bad way of thinking, saying this one event happened to me last season, which means that needs to impact my thinking during the next year. It can be a data point. It can be a little bit of evidence towards maybe not targeting wide receiver early as heavily, but you cannot just say, I drafted a bust in the first round last year at a position, so I can't take it again this year. Because does that mean you're also not drafting McCaffrey? I mean, he busted in the first round. Are you also not drafting tight end early because Kittle busted early? Like, you could do it at every single position. It's just that you happen to draft one of the busts at wide receivers instead of running back. But no one is sitting here saying can't take a running back early because McCaffrey busted. Then why are we saying you can't take a wide receiver early because Michael Thomas busted? It's the exact same thing. So just be mindful of that. You can't just look at what happened to your specific team and then blindly just say, well, no matter who it is next year, I can't take that position. It doesn't work like that. This is a really bad way of thinking. So let's move on to this guy's draft. So you'll see on the screen here, we'll make it bigger for you. Michael Thomas, like I said, and this is 9th overall. This is a 10-team league. I don't know the scoring format, but my assumption is that it was either half or full PPR. Realistically, doesn't matter all that much. Since Michael Thomas went this late, I would guess that it's half PPR. So I'll go through all the rounds, and then we'll kind of break it down from there. Michael Thomas first. Then he goes heavy at running back in the next two, taking Miles Sanders and Jonathan Taylor. Switches back to wide receiver. Love this. This is something we preached last season. Try and grab a few of those running backs early, and then all the values at wide receiver in the middle rounds. Attack it there. Gets Ridley in the 4th, Robert Woods in the 5th, DJ Chark in the 6th. Goes back to running back, takes Swift in the 7th, McLaurin in the 8th, takes his quarterback, Josh Allen, in the 9th. Dobbins secures his 4th running back in the 10th round, then doesn't take a running back for the rest of the draft, grabs Hurst as his tight end in the 11th, Deontay Johnson in the 12th, backup quarterback Teddy Bridgewater in the 13th, don't love that, and then Seattle Seahawks 14th, backup tight end Jarwin in the 15th, and Dan Bailey in the 16th. So you're looking at Michael Thomas, and you're saying, well, how did that happen? Like, how did Michael Thomas go 9? The first round for this guy was McCaffrey, Barkley, Kamara, Henry, Zeke, Dalvin. That was like a fairly standard top 6. Mahomes was not going that early, but in this league, Mahomes goes, and then Clyde goes at 8. So this was first wide receiver off the board, but saying first quarterback's gone. Tight end was still there, but in general, Kelsey was going in like the late teens. So like this season, you might take Kelsey with that. Last season, that wasn't really on anyone's mind. So takes Michael Thomas there. I think that's perfectly fine. I don't remember exactly where we had Thomas ranked. It was in that like 7 or 8 kind of range. I believe that we had all of those top 7 running backs before him, and all the 7 that got taken. We definitely didn't have Mahomes before him, but this was just the range we were taking Michael Thomas. Will you take it this year? Probably not, but the dude was coming off a record-breaking season, and so I don't think that was an issue at all. Takes Miles Sanders at that next pick. Again, I mean, I liked Miles Sanders this last year. Didn't work because of just Wentz playing horrible and just a few injuries that he had, but we saw to close the season. I mean, if he played like that when they had Hurts in the game, like he was going to be an absolutely amazing pick. So I don't have a problem with how this started off. Obviously, it's unfortunate taking Michael Thomas when he gets injured so many times and clearly was a bust this season. But I don't think there's anything we can like take away. Now, if we look at this team, this was very close to something that you would get if you just followed the rankings. Like this was in general a lot of our targets. We had, I don't know that we had Michael Thomas as a target, but for the running backs, Sanders, Jonathan Taylor, Swift, Dobbins, loved all of those guys as targets. Loved Calvin Ridley, Robert Woods, loved DJ Chark. Unfortunately, that one didn't work out. But, you know, just I thought he was going to be, I thought he is a really good talent. And honestly, it was just a quarterback play. I think they improved the quarterback situation he's going to be a good pick. But then we got LaVisca. We'll talk about that in other videos. But point being, thought that was a perfectly fine pick. McLaurin, loved him in the middle round. So basically this entire draft was just players that we really liked targeting. It broke down after the 12th. In general, if you watch our mock drafts, we're not taking Teddy Bridgewater as a backup quarterback. We're not taking Blake Jarwin as a backup tight end. Blake Jarwin as your first tight end maybe, but not as a backup. No real need to take a backup tight end. But this was a draft that you probably would have gotten if you did our teams. What is, I believe this is NFL does this. Every site is different. I know I'm in one ESPN league and they do like a projected standings. And so something you're going to notice is if you draft based off of how I put together the rankings, this is not uncommon. Like the systems do not like how we draft. We prioritize youth. So we prioritize players who your opening projection is probably not going to be very strong. You know, we look at who this guy has at running back. Jonathan Taylor, I mean, he didn't break out until the second half. We weren't expecting him to break out until the second half. DeAndre Swift had a very limited role in the first half, broke out in the second half. J.K. Dobbins, limited role. So all these running backs that we like, we're not trying to build a team that's going to go 13-0 in the regular season. Obviously, we're not trying to build a team that goes 0-13. That's kind of ridiculous that they put that together as a projection. But the point is, we're not targeting, in general, honestly, older players that start off the season strong and then taper off. We're targeting players who we think are going to overtake the starters at some point, but that means you're not going to have a good projection to start the season. This happened to a few teams that I had. I think when I drafted a team, my second place team on ESPN, I want to say it was like 8th or 9th. I don't remember entirely, but it was not projected to finish first just because there were so many young players that we knew were going to break out at some point, but the projections aren't going to take that into account, so they don't like it. The projections also don't like how long we on average wait for some of these positions, so we're going to be under projected at quarterback at times, at least last season. This next season, that might change. We were probably under projected if you didn't take Kelsey or Kittle. You were under projected at tight end. We were waiting on defense and kicker. So just how we draft, I just want to make this a point. You're going to see this sometimes. You're going to see maybe not 0-13 for a projection, but you're going to see on ESPN, you're going to be really far down in the rankings. Don't pay attention to that because we're prioritizing youth and players who break out when it matters. And so all you need to do is do like this guy did, go 7-6 in the regular season, but you're peaking late. You're peaking in the fantasy playoffs, and that's how you win a championship like this guy did. So let's move on actually before we do this to the trades. And if you were looking at the screen right before I clicked it, you didn't see very many differences. And so before this video, in the first 3 episodes, we looked at a lot of teams that maybe struggled during the draft or just were not championship teams coming out of the draft, but that traded their way to championship teams. You know, they packaged multiple players for one, they sold high on players. This is a championship team that did not do that. There were absolutely no trades that this person performed. They said that they tried to do 2-for-1 trades, tried to do 3-for-1 trades, but just no one in their league was buying. And since I see that so much in the comment section, people are like, listen, I understand the value of this, but my league just won't do it. I wanted to show you a championship team that couldn't get anything done. They also send their message that next season they want to try to be a little bit more aggressive. And so maybe instead of offering a 2-for-1 trade, try and offer 3-for-1, try and offer 4-for-1 trades. Just try and really entice the seller, I guess, into giving you that stud for multiple pieces because, as we've said before, there are so many benefits to your team. You increase the weekly projection on your team. You're getting in free agents, especially doing this early in the season when there's so many free agents that we want. If you're sitting there like, oh man, there's like 10 guys on free agency that really like my team, but my bench isn't big enough, 3-for-1 trade. 3-for-1, take 3 people on your team, give them away, acquire 1 stud, increase that projection while also bringing in 2 players you really want. But they said they couldn't get that done. They will be more aggressive next season. I mean, they ended this season with Claypool on the bench, Deontay Johnson on the bench, Terry McLaurin on the bench. I mean, you could probably package 3 of those guys for a really, really nice player and then bring in a few guys from free agency. So they said they're going to be a little bit more aggressive next season. I concur. Listen, guys, I know some of you are in leagues like this where they will not trade. Just keep trying. Send it to different teams. Write messages in there. If you're playing with people you know, send them a text message. It doesn't always have to be through the app. Text them, be like, hey, listen, you're 1-3, or you've got all these running backs you don't need. Like, just try and work out a deal that actually benefits them. And remember, 2 for 1 and 3 for 1. So waiver wire, what did they do when, they weren't be trading? Honestly, they said they didn't do too much. They grabbed Kittle when he was injured because on the off chance that when he came back, he was really good, which kind of ended up happening. TJ Hawkinson also, like I always say, it was Kelsey, Waller, sometimes Andrews, and then a huge gap. So when you see, oh my goodness, how is Hawkinson on free agency? All of these different tight ends had like 1 point floors. So there were definitely times when a bunch of guys got dropped. Added Claypool, that was a nice add, but if you looked at their wide receivers, probably didn't end up helping all that much. And they said the rest of their waiver wires was really just adding some kickers, streaming that position, adding defense, streaming that position. You'll see, or maybe you already saw on the final roster, they have 2 kickers and 2 defenses. That was not the case, they said, for the whole season. It was just kind of playing keep away to end the season. They didn't want them adding a good kicker, adding a good defense, but for all of the season, they only had 1 of each. And like I said, won the championship, 7-6 record, 4th place overall. And this was a team that did that without trading. They would have been stronger had they been able to pull off 2 for 1 and 3 for 1 trades. But sometimes it's just not possible. So let's pull up the team again. To close out the season, Josh Allen, this is the starting lineup. Josh Allen, Swift, Jonathan Taylor. Wide receivers, Robert Woods, Calvin Ridley, Miles Sanders at flex, or I guess running back / wide receiver spot. Hawkinson at tight end. And then the bench was Dobbins, Claypool, Deontay, McLaurin, Kittle, and then the Suckup and Sanders at kicker, and Browns and Colts at defense. So a really strong team. Definitely would have been better had they been able to bring in that tight end. But honestly, it's a really good team. And if we look at it, this is the first team that we have gone over that didn't drop like 75, 80% of their team. They only dropped 7 of their 16 picks and only 3 of the first 12. If we look back to the draft, pull that up here, they dropped Michael Thomas when he gets injured, dropped DJ Chark when he wasn't performing as well, and this is really where most of it came through. Drops Teddy Bridgewater, drops the Seahawks. I don't remember, I don't know when these happened. Maybe they dropped the Seahawks, add them back. Maybe they used Bailey for a portion of the season, but it was basically just the end of the draft, and that's really where you want these drops to happen. And it's also worth pointing out, would have benefited. So in our general strategy, would have benefited grabbing another running back, grabbing another receiver, because they only had 4. Sanders, Jonathan Taylor, Swift, and Dobbins. So if you convert either Teddy or Jarwin into another high upside running back, it's probably more beneficial than grabbing Teddy Bridgewater, who, while was going to be a value, what is the ceiling on Teddy Bridgewater? Probably just a streamer. And so there's no real point in grabbing your streamer when you have Josh Allen. Same thing with Jarwin. He could have been really good this season, obviously gets injured, but your team benefits more when you're taking these shots at running back and at wide receiver, because the odds that Jarwin breaks out as like a top 5 tight end that just dominates at this pick is relatively low. And so you're just better off taking one of the wide receivers or running back. So that was just the one thing I want to mention there. But a really, really strong draft. Hits on basically all of the running backs, hits on most of the wide receivers, gets their tight end, gets their quarterback. End up taking defense and kicker late, which is something that we preach. Again, it's the backup quarterback and tight ends. Would have been better off taking the running back and wide receiver there. But that is a really, really strong draft. And I'm glad that someone had a strong draft when they very clearly followed the rankings. Again, in general, you should assume that you're going to have more busts than this person had. And that's why I like taking more running backs, because I'm not going to say you got lucky, because those were people we were saying to take, and then they did end up breaking out. But when you're taking 4 running backs, in general, you should assume that 2 of them are going to bust. And so I would prefer making that a little bit more even with running backs and wide receivers and then just not taking those backups. But that is basically it. Another thing, this kind of goes back to what I talked about at the beginning, takes some rookies. So takes 3 rookie running backs out of 4 total running backs. And I'm very, very pleased that when they did this, they didn't panic sell. They didn't drop them when they were underperforming. They just stayed the course. They said, these are talented running backs. I'm going to keep them on my roster. Yes, it is not working out right now, but I know at some point they're going to produce. And when they do, they're going to be really, really good on my team. Very impressive that for all 3 ends up keeping them on the roster and finishing the season with them. I know a lot of people drafted them and then looked at Swift wasn't performing and said, nope, getting rid of you. Dobbins wasn't performing, said, nope, I'm going to drop you. And obviously they were very sad when that ends up happening. I got a lot of people asking, should I drop Jonathan Taylor? So I'm sure a lot of people end up dropping them. When you've got these players we like that are very, very young, and we say, listen, they're not going to break out in week 1, probably not week 2, week 3, week 4. But in the second half of the season, when it really, really matters, that's when they break out and they have a lot of upside because of the offenses they were on, then you should not be panicking and you should be rewarded with a championship when you're able to stay course. So I just wanted to mention that. Last thing we'll talk about with this one is he talked about struggling with starting each week. So he said, I had these stud receivers, remember, at some point in the season. Ridley, Woods, Chark, McLaurin, Deontay, and Claypool. Ends up dropping Chark, getting Claypool. But at some point in the season, has all these guys, and you can only start 3 of them, and said it was very, very difficult because their projections were basically the same. In the rankings, they were all like right next to each other. If you're looking at ceiling, think about matchup. I mean, who has a higher ceiling? Obviously, like Ridley, you would look at this list and say he's probably starting every week. But Robert Woods still has a ceiling. McLaurin and Woods were very, very close. We went through a stretch where Deontay was like getting benched almost, it felt like. Claypool was going off for a while. And so it was like, you've got all these guys. It's like, what do you do when you have no idea who to start? It's almost impossible to make the correct decision. I mean, my obvious response is always trades. I would have preferred if you were able to package really any 2 of these guys for a better receiver, because if you have no idea who to start between Woods, McLaurin, and Claypool, well, why don't you just trade Woods and Claypool, or Woods and McLaurin, or McLaurin and Claypool for a better receiver that you know you're going to start? Now you've got a little bit of an upgrade there. But again, this guy wasn't able to do that. And if that's the case, listen, it's still preferred. It's still preferred if you're like, I have so many good players, who do I start? As opposed to, I have so many bad players, who do I have to start? So I think that was pretty much all we can take away from this draft is stay the course. If you draft players who we talk about having upside late in the season, and it's not late in the season yet, try your hardest not to drop those players. Obviously, if there's really good players on free agency, you've got your Ayuks, your Justin Jeffersons, your James Robinson. Okay, you can end up dropping some of these guys, but you know, that's what the 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th, that's what all those rounds are for, is taking super high upside players that were like, oh, okay, that didn't work out. Well, I'll add James Robinson. That's not what your, what was it, like 8th round, somewhere in that range for like your 6th through 8th round for like Swift, and your 10th round for Dobbins. It's not those players that we're dropping for these studs on free agency. It's those high upside players. And that's why it's no use taking your backup quarterback, because you're going to end up dropping them anyways. So that is it for this one. Hope you guys did enjoy. If you did, how about hitting that like button? And how about subscribing to the channel if you're new? Thanks for watching.